flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The approval of the agenda.
Mr. President, approve the agenda as presented with the following amendments. 1, addition certified and classified personnel actions for consideration, item E3. 2, additional item number 5.1, executive session for personnel matters, with non-elected personnel. And 3, item E2, amend to have accounts payable amount totaling $4,288,071.59.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. All right, move on to delegations, questions, answers, public comments. For that, okay. We have a presentation. Journalism and multimedia programs. Very multimedia teacher at Garden State High.
I'm just here to introduce him, but Eric Vielander is in his second year at Garden City High School, though not his first year teaching, not his second year teaching, but his second year with us at Garden City High School. He teaches our 21st century journalism classes as well as our radio and TV broadcasting. We are really proud of the job that he's been doing to grow the program there at the high school, and he has brought a couple of students along with him to tell a little bit about the program.
Gabe and Javi, stand up. Wave. These are my president, vice president, Gabriel Valdez and Javier Perez. They're doing a great job so far. We're a couple weeks in, and yet we've already been working for 5 weeks. They've been, I don't know if they know what they signed up for, but they're doing a great job. And we have a big year, and I'd like to take you through a few of those points. We have my slide somewhere. I have it on here, and I'm not gonna bore anyone with reading through it all. So I have some highlights, and then, if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them. While we get that pulled up, like Dr. Duncan said, I was hired last year. It's my first in the district, and I had I started out with 22 students in my advanced class, and we ended up with 14. It was a rough year. It was a learning year. We did over 50 varsity sports events, both here and in Wichita. What else did we do? About 3 hours of live broadcast on KBFZ, 0 hours of broadcast on the television channel, which we still have. I'm checking in on that right now. We built an AV cart, which has been great. We can transmit anywhere on campus, as well as kind of redid 2 recording studios. So kind of a growing year. Near the end of the year, I was on a recruiting kick, and I'm happy to say that I've quadrupled my advanced class size to about 52 as of yesterday. So it's been a great feeling. I've had kids supporting me, talking about the program and all the things that we do. What else do we have? We have 29 core members and sports broadcasters as of today. I just checked on our organizational app. We are currently producing 13 bi-weekly TV episodes for the cable channel as well as YouTube. We have 100 30-minute student hosted programming blocks for KBFZ in the works. So we'll have about 2 years of content by November that we can constantly play. I'm thinking Saturday nights would be nice. It's a little bit of a student takeover and break our format on KBFC. We're also working with WIC, Finney County Health Department, the fire and police and city of Garden City to make our PSAs more robust on the radio, as well as there have been whispers. I want to get our station on the downtown speakers. So talking with Downtown Vision about that, but just casually right now. And then we reaffiliated with the Kansas Association of Broadcasters. They're happy to have us back and we want to start winning awards. If you've been down to my lab, there have to be 300 awards on that wall. And we want to completely take that over. We don't want the paint to show. So that's kind of what we have planned this year. As far as a 5-year vision, I've planned out to, if we can get the next slide. Ta-da, I know how to work computers. I would like to add some more advanced students. In the past year, we had 1 completer. If you're probably all very familiar with the CTE program. Basically, if they take 3 classes with me, they can earn things like college credit. I can give them a letter of recommendation that says, hey, I, a trained journalist, have given them the knowledge to succeed. Currently, we have 2 graduates working in media and another pursuing it in college. I'd like to make that 10+ a year. And I think with the growth that we were seeing, that's a distinct possibility. We're on track to do that in about 3 years. I'd like to do things over the summer. Have kids working on the radio during the summer. We want to win an Emmy. I think that's the big motivator. We're dusting off a piece because I see something special in my students. They're hardworking, they're very creative. And yeah, we're having a great time doing it. Like I said, we have a lot that we bit off this year as far as the growth that we want to see, but we want to start doing what a media program is supposed to do, which is help the community, make our school and our school district look amazing as it is. Because we have a lot of things going on, and I feel like they're secret right now. We have a thriving theater department that didn't have commercials on the radio for people to come see their things. We have varsity sports programs that have 50, 60 viewers at a time, when if we were advertising those on our own platform, we could quadruple that. But people don't know where to go. So yeah, like I said, there's a lot of things, and I don't want to go line for line because it would take forever, because I have so many ideas and these guys have so many ideas. So I just wanted to thank you for the opportunity to kind of brag about the work that these kids have been doing. And we have big plans. This is a privilege. I didn't even know if teaching was right for me. And then with Dr. Duncan's leadership, I got right back into it. And I feel like this is a place where I can thrive, and your leadership and Dr. Duncan's leadership have made me feel welcome. So thank you all. Boys, do you want to say anything about the program, or just real quick, if that's all right?
Yeah.
Just as a point of clarification, these gentlemen, president and vice president.
Yes, these are
Come on over.
Buffalo Broadcasting.
Okay.
These are the guys.
So I'm the president and this is my vice. We're kind of the main, I guess, people that just really plan the events, get things going, let people know what they need to do and when they need to do it. This guy's kind of like my brain. I'm more like a face, to be honest, but he just makes things and puts them in motion. And he does a lot.
We have a very big plans. We are both seniors right now currently, and is unfortunately our last year. So we were really hoping to really expand more on what we have currently, but there's really so much that we can really do as seniors. But we really are trying our best. We're trying to lead the other people, like the freshmen or the sophomores. We're trying to really lead them to, I guess, push them in the right direction and like in the vision that we and VLander has for the club and just like for the classes in general. And we're just really excited and hoping that we can really continue to push forward from where we are. And even if like we have some troubles along the way, we can just still, I guess, continue to strive is what I'm just saying.
And I do want to say, out of all the teachers I've ever had, I'm glad to say that this is the teacher that I have for this. Just putting that out there. He's a great teacher and a great man, and proud to call him my mentor. Thanks.
Hey, before you guys step down, we might have some questions for you, so.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Does anybody on the board have any questions for the group?
A couple. I'm curious about what your post-high school plans are, if you're looking into going into this area or what you
So
think you might do.
So for me personally, I am really trying to go into photojournalism currently, as right now I am part of the yearbook as well, and should be the school newspaper as well. And as for him, what do you want to go into?
It's always been a dream of mine for a long time to just be a radio voice. Like, hey guys, you're listening to some whole thing. But I think it's something that I'd really like to go on and maybe be a news anchor or something. It's just really been a passion of mine since I was young.
I picked the right ones, is what they're saying. You got some journalism, some personality. It's good.
A couple of things. First of all, pretty exciting what you sort of rattled off there. What are you missing right now that you need to help you get that Emmy?
Get that Emmy, time, always time, but things that we can control. I would say incidentals. I only have one charger for my Sony cam right now, and I have 3 of them. SD cards, batteries, things that my Perkins funds don't cover, because we get a Perkins grant. I don't know exactly how much, but it's about $5,000. But there are things that it does not cover. So we get new capabilities, but then our old things, our legacy equipment, while it's still good, things walk away, things break. So things like that. But I want to say that the lab looks great. There could always be new toys and all those things. But really it's just incidentals that we're looking for. And then as far as subscriptions, things like the Kansas Association for Broadcasting, that costs money. ASCAP, CSAC, and BMI subscriptions for our music, that costs money. FCC things. So, we're talking today in our meeting before here about fundraising. Hey, what are we doing? Because there wasn't really anything before I got here. There was a classroom and a few students that were interested, and we've grown that. But now we're kind of on our own. We don't have a booster club. We don't have all these things that maybe some of the athletics or other clubs have. So it's just I'll say that the plans we've made are under our current budget, and I think we can do a lot. But yeah, a little relief always helps. Absolutely. And then, I would love TAs all the time to run my radio station. Wouldn't it be great to have 8 hours of student voice all day? And I have 2 right now, and I want to scoop more if I can. And I have them, whenever I don't have them setting up green screens or cameras for me, they jump on the radio, play some songs, pick some stuff. I'd love to do that in an official manner, in an official way where, maybe I'll have students apply for it, say, you get to be the KBFZ TA. Things like that. But yeah, I mean, we're trying to make a lot happen with a lot. I'm endlessly grateful. When I moved to this district, I came from a very small district, about 250 kids. I cried when I saw this building. The amount that this community cares about its students is immediately apparent. And the fact that I have, 3 classrooms that amount to playrooms for me, and I have all these things that I create with my kids is just out of this world. When I give kids a tour of the class that they're about to use, they're speechless. So I really appreciate that.
I can back that up. Yes, we've
Yeah,
had,
me too.
we've seen many things like, oh, this is actually really cool. Like, I've
Yeah,
seen so many of that.
My blank canvas, right?
Yeah.
You walk into the TV room and, there's a couple of backdrops and some plugs into the ground. We can do whatever we want in there.
Did I get that right on the numbers? You've got how many enrolled?
In my advanced class, 52 as of today. We had one drop on Friday. I think it scared her. Cause I said, we're serious. We have 13 TV episodes. She goes, 13. So, but it's not for everybody. It should be a tough program in my opinion. Media and media literacy is super important right now. Having responsible people who know how to use the tech, but also how to present stories in an ethical way are extremely important. And not everybody's into that. It's tough. Yes, Dr. Megan.
Well, and Mr. Vielander and I, we spoke all last year also about above TV productions that if we can and do have a quality product that we're going to be able to maybe have canned positive stories about Garden City Public Schools that will run on a Wichita station. And I'm not trying to promote any one of them, but it could be on that. We see millions of people would see us. So he definitely has that. Once we have that cleaned up for the press and the VP, that is one way to get that Emmy, because if it's viewed, it is well put together. We do have the emerging media. If it's poignant, they can run it. It's a canned story. They will run it, and then we'll get millions of people viewing it. So that is part and parcel of what we're doing, and that will get us more to 52, and then 10, like you say, be able to get those certs and be with you for 3 years. So how many years have you gentlemen been with the program?
This is my 3rd year.
Right. See, so that's exactly right. You get 3 years in and you get that cert, and then you're ready to move on into your next career in emerging media, whatever that is. So I want to go be a newscaster. I want to be whatever that looks like. So we just need to get the numbers up. That's, part of Mr. Vielander, the recruiting. And it's all about the engagement. Once we engage the student, that brings the people and the families in. So engage, enrich, empower. There you go.
Yeah, and I feel like these guys have been empowering themselves, just taking the lead on things, taking some weight off my shoulders every once. It's great, it's nice, and really just charging forward and buying into. I'm a vision guy, right? And then buying into the things that I say, like, hey, why don't we try for an Emmy? Let's give ourselves 5 years, and we've already burned one. I'm gonna do it from when I walked in the door, and they said, yep, signed right up, and they signed 20 of their friends up. Which has been great. But no,
I just want to comment. I'm just really thankful you came here and shared with us tonight. I remember fellow board members. I was at the barber shop. I don't know what 6 weeks ago or something like that.
right before, yeah, we started new class.
Yeah, I was going in to get my haircut. He was in the chair and he was just talking about the program. It was just like out there in public, sharing about his passion for his students and what they're doing. And I just told him, man, I'd love to hear you come and present to the board and share this with the rest of the board. So thank you for coming tonight. I think it was great to hear from you guys. Really, you had to say about student leadership and mentoring and growing your underclassmen. It's a fantastic way, and it's awesome to see you guys using this class not only to teach yourselves, but grow your leadership abilities. So thank you.
We need to get a picture with the board.
Downtown.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
I have one more question. So you guys have obviously been in the program for a long time and you've worked on different stuff. What would be your favorite project that you've maybe worked on, or maybe something that you've put together while you've been in the program?
So for me, I think, okay, so currently we are working on a TV show, as mentioned before. And I think right now we have, we worked on during the summer on an intro basically. And it was just like, I guess it was like one of like our first big steps to moving to like what we really like want like to succeed in this program basically. So I'm pretty sure like the intro that we worked on for our TV shows, like probably one of like the best projects that we worked on. It was just like a huge step, and it was just like, we're actually really making good progress here.
Yeah, I'd say pretty much just the same for me, but I also did enjoy just recording and streaming the games. That was always fun. It was cool to just, I guess, get a free spot at every game, just. But yeah, working with all my, students and peers and all that has just been really cool.
Thank you, guys.
Let's get a pick of you guys. With the board, then let's get over here with the board.
Right in front of the
Right here.
table. Yep. You guys can be in the front row.
No, you guys gonna be big time.
You're the celebs.
Yeah.
We'll let her take a picture like that. Here's the fiance. 2, 3. There you go.
Coming.
I appreciate it.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Very nice.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Nice to meet you. I teach your son.
Okay, that's my kid's cousin. Yes. Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Good job.
Thank you, guys. for
Thank you, guys.
the presentation. So, we'll move on to, is there any correspondence? We'll move on to the consent agenda.
President, I move to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Great. We'll move on now to new business. Presentation on boundaries.
Right. Josh and I wanted to kind of give you a little bit of background real quick on the boundary study. First off, back in July, when the board did a board retreat, specifically the board kind of identified goals and priorities for the next year. One of the highest priorities from the board was a boundary study. In addition to that, on the 5-year strategic plan, underneath facilities and resources, the board also identified that we explore reconfiguration opportunities to enhance efficiency of the district and best practices for students. So that's kind of been why we have taken the direction of the boundary study. What started off kind of our process of looking at a couple of different proposals to identify some companies to come in and do the boundary study for the district. One of the other pieces of information that you do have in front of you as well that's printed is the student transfers as of the 25th.
It's one of the sheets I gave you all.
It has all the different tables on it. So over on the left, that first box, you can see the total transfer requests recorded per year. So last year we had 264. This year we have a total of 329. So that's an increase of 65. The prior year, the 229 to 264 is up 35 from the prior year. At the top box there, you can see the breakdown, the individual requests out versus the requests in for the parent transfers and the parent requests. Right underneath that, there's a breakdown of those 329 requests per grade level. Then in district versus out of district. So we had 290 of those were to transfer, were transfers from within the district. And 39 are those from students out of district that are requesting to transfer in. 73 of those are associated with employees. So employees that work at specific buildings request for their students to be transferred into those schools. 256 were non-employees. And then right below that, you have the overcapacity transfers. New term that we are using to talk about overcapacity and where those transfers are occurring at. So you have a breakdown per grade and then per school. As you notice, Jenny Barker has the majority. 26 of those 58 total are Jenny Barker, so it accounts for 46% of those. As you know, Chapel Heights is one of the newer developments that growth and that development has specifically affected Florence Wilson as well as Jenny Barker. Sorry, Chapel Heights just affected Jenny Barker, but there's other developments off of Spruce that have affected VO.
Can I ask a quick question? I'm
Go for
sorry
it.
to interrupt.
Yep.
But I'm just curious, are you gonna get to class sizes, like for instance, Jenny Barker, these are big numbers and for the reasons you just alluded to. And so there's always that question of how big are the ones? When did we start forcing the transfer? You see what I'm saying? Is it a 22 student goal or?
So board policy sets that,
23 at elementary.
23 at K2,
25.
25 at third grade, 27 at fourth grade,
Yep.
and
Fifth and sixth.
fifth and sixth,
But at Jenny Barker,
in fourth grade.
in fifth and sixth grade though, I didn't.
Oh, yeah,
They
yeah,
have
fifth and sixth.
classroom space for 20.
So we have the board policy, but then we sometimes, once in a while, we ask the teacher.
Principal discretion. Yeah.
Yeah,
Additional to.
they can do that as long as the teacher and the principal agree to that. But
And
with those
space.
numbers, I mean,
Yeah, those are.
yeah. Typically, we'll do that if we have a family where if they take this one more, we won't have to separate a family. And so we try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah,
So of the 329 transfers this year, 58 of those total are directly over capacity transfers. But also within, and that's 18% of that 329. Of those 329, majority of those are also associated with prior year over capacity transfers. So students were transferred into those schools. Then the parents continue to submit the transfer request each year to continue their child staying in the same elementary school.
they start to build
so-
those relationships with the families. They want to
Yep.
stay and continue.
So realistically, a large percentage of the 329 are associated in some way with overcapacity transfers.
And
So I wanted to make sure the board is aware of that.
And I would also say that the overcapacity transfers would be much higher if we didn't have the parent request for transfers, because a lot of those were parent requests to transfer out of classrooms where we were out of buildings where we were over capacity. So
That's gonna be my question.
that saved us from having to call and move more families.
Yeah, that was gonna be my question, because Jenny Barker was a school that brought in the highlight, and it surprised me that we have 31 parents that wanted to request their kids out of Jenny Barker.
And a lot of that is because they've been forced,
Already established relationships at other schools, so they want to remain.
they want to stay where they're at.
So you're saying they were moved prior year because.
Some of
the
them,
overcapacity?
some of them, I couldn't venture to say all of them, Andy, but some of them were, yes, sir.
The 329 too is 5% of our total student head count. So just wanted to make sure that's aware, the board's aware of about 5% that we're doing on transfers each year too.
Any of the 39, the out of district 39, are those, any of those disciplinary reasons? Like we've removed them from our district.
So if they are expelled in another district, we don't have to take them. And so even if they're in our boundaries, we don't necessarily have to take them. If they get expelled from Holcomb and they want to come to Garden City, and we typically don't take them if that's the case. So
When considering these transfers, also wanted to bring it to the board's attention of the direct impact, of course, students and families, administration to then process all of these transfers, bring together a committee, move through those, technology, enrollment, and also transportation. So these overcapacity transfers, we're now transferring them, but the majority of them usually get bussed over to Eda Sharman. So those are also additional burdens on those departments to make sure that we process all of these transfers each year.
Because that's the other issue too. We're over capacity on the east side of town, but we're under capacity on the west side of town. And so those boundaries are pretty lopsided right now.
So the process that we went through, we reached out to the business manager listserv across the state, asked our counterparts to recommend companies that they've used for boundary studies prior to. So we received names of 2 organizations that we could hire. We then looked through proposals, had a couple of phone calls, really talked to them in depth about what is going on in Garden City, what the district really needs, our identified priorities with a boundary study. When we did the last boundary study about a decade ago, RSP was the vendor at that time as well that performed that study. And then we really just kind of looked at the business models and the proposals, the features of both companies, really compared those two. And we really felt like the ability of RSP to carry out what the district needs, what we have identified, working with a committee group to move forward, that this was the best company that could really deliver for the district on the opportunity. So do you have anything else to
No,
add?
that's,
We'd like to hand this over to Robert, who will present on the solution that RSP has for the district. Unless there's any other questions.
Just a comment, it seemed logical to go with them. They did such a great job last time. Buildings
Yeah.
forward kind of thing, so.
They received outstanding reviews from our counterparts across the state, so we feel confident about the solution that they have to offer. Robert, go ahead.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Glad there's somebody that remembers us from a decade ago. It does seem like a long time ago. What I'm going to go over with you is probably about 9 or 10 slides, and I'll talk a lot to what you see on those slides that will build on what you heard Colleen specifically talking to, and give you some comfort of what this process may mean, because it's a little bit different than where things were a decade ago. So the first thing about RSP, since we're a little bit new to many of you, is I'm the owner of the company. I started it almost 20 years ago. We exclusively work with school districts all through the Midwest. Again, it was mentioned we were there 10 years ago to set your boundaries. A lot has changed in those 10 years. Besides the pandemic, we've had demographic shifts, developments have come online, things have shifted, and clearly challenges on the east side with too many kids and too few kids on the west side. A little more about RSP. We just finished a huge project in Lawrence. If I just focus on Kansas, in that project, we took them through a facility master plan and a boundary analysis. First, we identified buildings that needed to be closed because of utilization issues. And then we took them through the process of, well, with those buildings going offline, how do we align the boundaries and how do we fit some of the constraints, some of the desires of the community to have what these new boundaries needed to be. So it's a little bit about like one of our recent projects. Also on staff, we have another planner, Jenna Wallace, who has assisted me on many of these projects that you see listed here, whether it's Hutchinson or what we recently did with Dodge City in understanding their enrollments. Along with this, we have other people on staff that put together the maps and the analysis to help bring to light the stories that are happening with the data, whether it's demographics, development, and building toward creating some scenarios that the community can provide some feedback, and then ultimately come to you, the Board of Education, with adopting some sort of plan that I'll talk about in greater detail. But that's a little bit about RSP. We're very much well-versed in working with communities, whether it's virtually or in person, to get through some of these challenging items with boundaries. The process that we mapped out for the district, again, with Dr. Dominguez and Colleen and others, is shown up here on this particular page. We like to see which our processes with the Board of Education. That's the blue color. So there'll be some work that we give you leading into the Christmas holiday break to prepare you for January 8th. But that's the most important piece in how things may look when it gets to the end. So we'll talk more. I do a little bit in this presentation, but we'll talk in greater detail what that means for guiding principles, boundary criteria. We then have 4 committee meetings that meet through the spring, starting in February 2nd and then ending on April 4th. They'll be, and those are the green boxes. The orange box, we have 2 back-to-back public inputs that occur after your spring break on March 20th and the 21st. This really is the most important piece for the community to provide their feedback. And we have different things that will happen in that public input. We'll also have a survey that can be available in several languages to be able to get input for those that can't attend the meeting, but also for those that leave the meeting, they can leave their input through that type of formats. All of this is to conclude for your Monday, April the 15th. I asked if that was a joke, knowing that's tax day, right? But you guys actually have a board meeting on April 15th. That would be when you would vote on the plan so that it could be adopted and administration can move through the process of what that may mean to move staff to different buildings and to communicate to families what those changes might be that would be implemented in that 24-25 school year. So that's the process. This next page kind of outlines the roles. And again, just like anything in life, you have to have a sandbox that people can play in and they know what they get to do. So this just kind of highlights the committee is reviewing what scenarios could be and providing input, really trying to provide some of the direction based on what you, the Board of Education, set up for guiding principles and boundary criteria. RSP will be doing a lot of stuff with your enrollment analysis, and I'll talk a little bit about that here in the next page. And then the public input I've already mentioned. Again, working hard. With the previous presentation with those 2 young men, this will probably be something they could talk about quite a bit through this process of the spring to get that information out there. So I'll enjoy, if selected, to have some of those conversations with them to help educate everyone on what this process is and how we're trying to move it to some of these end goals. A little bit about some of this enrollment analysis. I put this up here really for you to get a sense of what we're going to be looking at in your community. I mentioned 10 years ago, a lot has changed. And so we'll look at things like what's happened with live birth data, what's happened with some of the immigration patterns, what's happened with development, what's happened with demographics. And we'll use a lot of different data sets ranging from census data to data sets that are available in your community with Feeney County and with the city, and just trying to get a sense of what's in the dirt and what's planned to be built. And maybe there's some things with some challenges with, let's say, affordable housing. How does that come into play with the timing of where we see students? All of this is the foundation to be able to build some of the scenarios. So the model looks at a lot of different things, and it's unique to your district in what that means for each of these planning areas, whether it's an apartment complex, a single family development, a mobile home development, twin homes, duplexes. So it's all tied back to how we identify things in your community. It'll be really interesting to see how they've changed over the last decade. One of the things that's wrapped around our entire process is this ACE concept. And so we know that it's critical when we start to change buildings, maybe grade configurations. There's a lot of things that are bought into with the community. And the first is there's things happening academically that may be seen as only happening in the building where you're having your children attend. Most assuredly, that's not the case, but academics is important. Culture, what's happening in those buildings, people know what they know in those buildings. So what are some of those traditions, some of those pride elements of why they like to be in those buildings, particularly when you get into those 326 students that are moving around through the process. Well, why is that happening? Is it just space? Is it where programs are or where programs are not? And of course, we have some reality that there's economics that drive some of this. We can't just have an open checkbook to build new buildings or put on additions or whatnot. We have to work within the constructs of what's occurring in your district financially. So that's that ACE thing that's wrapped around the whole process. We'll have a lot more conversation with that on January 8th. I've left you also with some things to start thinking about the sandbox, which is the guiding principles. And so we used two different projects that I showcased here, and I could have pulled Lawrence, Kansas in, right? But it was a little bit different since we were closing buildings. I thought Urbandale, Iowa, a project we completed 2 school years ago, kind of sets some of the framework that you all may be interested in. And some of it was where programs are and how they were going to change what building those buildings were in. But we want to set a nice guiding principle that the committee then knows what they can do and what they cannot do. So for instance, if we say we're going to stay with our system of an elementary, an intermediate, and a middle school, and into the one high school, that's important to know that as we start to look at scenarios, we're not changing that. Much like if a certain program is going to remain in a building and that's going to impact the number of kids that can or cannot be in that building, that's an important thing. So as we work through what those guiding principles will mean for your district, we'll work with your administration on some of those elements so that, again, you're just not blind trying to get around and trying to create what this framework could look like. We then have some metrics that occur with each of the options that we can tie back to data sets. And this will be some of your homework along with the guiding principles for that January 8th meeting. We'll provide visuals specific to the Garden City School District on what this means for each of these criteria. And they're all important, but we have to start the conversation by what is maybe the most important. And with the conversations we've had with administration, clearly projected enrollment and building utilization is a key thing. They want to minimize how much work and really negative impacts it has on families and students when you have to move kids to different buildings. Very disruptive, very negative. And there's a way we can fix that with some of the conversations that will happen between now and April 15th. I also wanted to leave you, just because I'm visual, I like to see some things of what does this maybe mean when you start to get to those options if you don't remember what that looked like 10 years ago. A lot of this has changed just with some of the mapping capabilities, but you'll have strong visuals that will help people know where the proposed boundary could be. And as it relates to some of the things, whether it's parks and roads and subdivisions, all of that really nice stuff. But then with that, there's a lot of data that's tied back to that. And so visually, what you see on this page is how it relates to that map with the colors that are identified for each of the elementary attendance areas. One of the key things that will be instrumental in this is that column that says building capacity. What does that mean? We could get into things. There's other districts where they will have monolingual and bilingual strands in buildings. If that's something the district's considering as we look at this, that'll have a different impact on building capacity. Much like if we have cluster sites for ELL or different things, that has a different impact on how we look at boundaries. but you'll see information of what it relates to for the number of kids, the percent capacity that building will be in those years. We'll look at some of the demographics. This district, the focus was on free and reduced lunch. So that's why it says FRL percents. They wanted to make sure they had a reasonable balance within the context of geography. And that's why one of the buildings is significantly lower. It's on the west side of the district, and there's just basically everything new is on the west side. And then we'll look at things like potentially ethnicity to make sure there's some sort of balance, to have some similarities, because that was a goal this district had with the end outcome. But again, whatever that looks like with the boundary criteria, that's what we look at. So again, my point here was just to give you kind of a highlight of the proposal and kind of take you through that. There's the first piece is the enrollment analysis. So September 20th kicks that off with official count. When selected, the district, we can start working with them. I know the staff's really busy with getting students registered, but starting to get some of that past data since the last time we worked there. That's the enrollment analysis. Then in the process, we have the boundary analysis to create all of the maps and the visuals, and then we have the public facilitation piece. So those are the three components, and that facilitation takes place with you, the Board of Education, with the committee, and then with the public in those public inputs. What we've tried to work with the district, probably our greatest challenge was try to get some dates that'll work with when the process needs to be completed so that they can have adequate time to do the planning for the 24-25 school year, but then how it fits in with things that are already in your schedule and things that are in our schedule. So we had to do a lot of back and forth to create what you see on that schedule. I think it's very doable as long as we, on January 8th, we have really good guiding principles and a prioritization of our criteria that will help that committee move through some of the difficult things of what does this really look like when we put into place those guiding principles and the boundary criteria. I'm going to stop and I'll yield back to you, the board, and to Dr. Dominguez for answering any questions. And if I have the answers, I'll give them to you tonight. If not, I'll respond back to Dr. Dominguez with the appropriate answer.
Questions answered or?
Any questions? I have a few concerns. So, as a board, this is a priority of ours to redistrict. I think the timing of doing it for next year's school year is a little bit challenging in a few ways. One, there's only two of us on the board that we aren't up for election. So by having material passed out in December, we're not going to have, our new board members aren't going to have access to that material, and they're going to be asked to set the direction of the boundary study at their very first meeting, which I think is somewhat of a challenge to new board members. So I said that's the first thing that kind of concerns me a little bit about starting it. The other thing is the public meetings being back to back. If someone's out of town or people are out of town, that doesn't give the public the opportunity maybe to express that. I know there's surveys and stuff like that, but I do think that by having the public meeting spread out, people may come to the first meeting and say, hey, why are we here? Why are we doing it? And they get some information for that. And then they may come back the second meeting after they've had time to think about it to ask the appropriate questions. So I'm all in favor of boundary study. I would just like to see us do it in a different time frame and push it to the 25-26 school year instead of the, the 24-25. Yeah, for those reasons. So
one thought, John, when you were kind of talking about that. So with that information being shared in December, in November, we'll find out who the new board members are in those 5 seats. Could we potentially invite them to that December meeting to be part of the conversation, hear the materials, the presentation, so that then they're ready for the January meeting? when they're sworn in. Is that something that we could do to continue to meet the timeline, involve them in the process, make sure that they have that information?
But in a lot of ways, it'll be public information to a degree because those meetings, that committee is, last time was like 40 people, correct? Colleen, how many's on that? I mean, 30 plus.
We utilize our district site council, which is made up of administrative staff, teachers, parents, community partners. One of the big portions of this too would be working with the city, with the neighborhood and development, the master plan that they have of what new developments are going to be coming to town. That'll be a big part of this process, but really putting the work back onto the committee with the lead of RSP to work through and kind of problem solve those items.
We think the newly elected board member, I mean, I understand the committee meetings. But the newly elected board meetings in their very first meeting are gonna have the knowledge to know what the district challenges are.
Well, to that degree, probably not, you know, are they gonna know the district woes if, and then we've gone from force out to overcapacity transfer, try to make it a little friendlier term, but it's still, if you've been one of those people that have been forced out in the past, I mean, I've talked to many people that are 40 plus years old and, you know, you'll see them at Dillon's or Home Depot or Walmart or whatever. And you know, I was forced out in third grade and they don't have a good memory about it. I mean, they don't. So, I mean, we're going to have to do it. Just when is the time to do it?
I'll just speak from personal opinion.
No. I mean, I agree with you.
I'm a year and a half in, being a board member, and I learned something every meeting about our district, and I learned from people's input. And to me, I think asking brand new board members to make a decision that's going to impact the district for probably the next decade at their very first meeting is a lot to ask.
Well, this RSP boundary study, that is, and you nailed it, is a projection for at least the next decade, next 10 years. And you don't want to do it more often than that due to the expense. However, as we've stated, in the north, the east, the northeast sides of town have grown, and you know, for whatever reason, older population on the west side, or they haven't moved there, whatever that looks like. I mean, we're just going to have to address it, but I do agree with you that it might be a little heavy for the first week board member for sure.
But I think if competent board members are elected, I mean, I look at these numbers and it's not rocket science. I mean, you can tell that it's not. You know what I mean? Even a newly elected board member, I think they'll be smart enough to see and hopefully digest the information that's given, and they can make a sound decision.
You know, it seems to me, and John mentioned really good points, but this is one of those that you almost need to make the decision or recognize the need to do a boundary study, and then you just need to do it. And there is maybe an unfortunate set of numbers there as far as election results. But at the same time, they would be getting on the very beginning of the process, that the decision would be made to go through the process, but they'd be getting in on the very beginning of the process. It's a tough process. Obviously, people have purchased their homes based on boundaries, school boundaries. And so it's not something to undertake lightly. But I think where this process is, the sort of the good news would be that they would be in on the very beginning of the process. The decision will have been made, but they'd be in on the very beginning.
I have a question regarding, so like for Lawrence, when they did this study, what is the typical? Are they implemented, is it being implemented the next school year, like this year, or what's the typical time frame that's done?
Robert, are you able to speak to that?
Yeah, I can. So it depends on each district when they have different challenges that need to be fixed. And so with Lawrence, we finished theirs boundary process in April of this year for this school year that we've just started. But a lot of those were taking buildings offline, so we had to do something. Others may wait a little bit. Sometimes it's political conversations such as new board members coming up, regardless of what that is. If there's a clear framework of the guiding principles and the prioritization of boundary criteria, we work well with all the board members. I mean, you just saw with these roughly 11 slides, they'll have the information they need. Now, do they have the experience that some of you that may have been on the board for a while have? Well, clearly not, but they've probably lived in your community for a bit, that they kind of know what's going on. And the key thing with the boundary criteria that starts the conversation, we can get into, like, let's say by meeting 2, and it's determined this isn't really working the way that the criteria maybe were thought they should work. There's still time for our team to pivot to provide something that's going to be a workable solution. So that way, when you do get to those public inputs, and if I can answer probably one of the comments about with them being back to back, there's a little bit different with what we do with public inputs. They're the same meeting each of those nights. So we give people an option of being able to attend with their busy schedule. We've even done it where one of those meetings, or could be both of them, particularly with, heck, you need to fill 8 hours. I heard earlier with content, they could be filmed and you could put them out on your website. And the survey that we use extends beyond that. So there's some elements of like how you can get the information out, because they shouldn't come to those public inputs and it's something new. We should already have enough information between what the administration's sending out, what's in the newspaper, all of these really cool things. But then they also have another public input, and that's on April 15th, right? So there's some other elements where the community still gets some insight and buy-in and comment at some point through this process. Hopefully that helps.
So the deal with the back-to-back things too, John, is having one in the evening and then one like maybe over the lunch hour or something like that. So depending on when people work, there would be different opportunities to try to attract more people to participate.
Will there be translators at those meetings?
I would assume so. I would think, just knowing our clientele, we would need to do that. At least for the languages that we have translators for sure.
Well, we need to have, obvious discussions in a board meeting, probably for the boundary criteria. How would that work? We have the new coming in participate in those meetings?
I don't see any reason why we couldn't invite them to the December meeting to be present and be a part of at least hearing the discussion and what that presentation is. I don't see why that would be an issue. Because by that point, you would know who is going to be on the board and sworn in as of January, and then January serving in as the actual board members. We could work with Jennifer Cunningham and make sure that we're within compliance of Open Records or Open Meetings Act. But we'll do whatever we can to make that work.
I would think anybody, I mean, it's just like any other board
Public
meeting.
setting.
It's a public meeting, so anybody can attend.
Certainly encourage the candidates today to attend the meetings to the extent they want to.
Absolutely.
Other questions?
You say there's going to be a meeting in December for all the information that is needed to formulate the guiding principle.
Yep.
So is there going to be any meetings between the kind of initial one in December where information is given, any sort of work session meetings where these are kind of discussed and developed before they're voted on December 8th? What's the process really to get from kind of initially handed the information to the January 8th decision?
Robert, could you speak to that a little bit? Did you hear that question?
Yeah, can you repeat it? I was not quite following.
Robert, my question, if I'm understanding this right, at some point, there's a date in December where we're gonna be given data that's gonna kind of set the framework for what we need to be thinking about for establishing the guiding principles for the boundary study, right?
Correct. And what we would try to target for the guiding principles and those boundary criteria is before you go on the holiday break. So whatever that meeting is, you would get that information. January 8th would be where the board would have the conversation about what do we think those guiding principles are and what is that prioritization of those criteria.
So my question is there typically some sort of a board retreat or something that takes place ahead of January 8th where the board has an opportunity to work through those ideas and kind of develop them? Or is it more where you just ask each board member to kind of come with their own independent ideas and the decision is just made at the January 8th meeting?
Yeah, I would say it's a combination of that, more so with being prepared. So the information that we would give them would be almost like a flipped classroom. So a lot of information that would come with visuals that would help support, kind of like if I go back to the page with the different guiding principles, we would work with administration to kind of hone in on what that reasonability might be. And so then at that January 8th meeting, there could be some other things that are added on. There could be things that might be removed. So it's pretty nimble from that standpoint, much like the boundary criteria where you'll have visuals. I go back another slide. Go back. Sorry about that. The criteria, you'll have some visuals of like, what does this mean when we look at demographic considerations, or if we talk about feeders that pertain specific to what you would see in your district. So there'll be a definition, there'll be visuals for them to see. What I have seen on January 8th, what some districts will do is they'll have, maybe before the board meeting, they'll have a workshop. And that's where there can be more detailed conversation, because usually when you get to a meeting like this, it's kind of pretty streamlined, right? So there could be something like what you just requested, that some sort of board workshop with the board, so that you really kind of understand, what does this all mean? What is the significance? Our team can talk through things like, hey, if you want to minimize the students that are impacted by the boundary change, and you also want to have duration of boundaries, well, we have to move a lot of kids to have that duration of boundaries, right? So we can talk through some of those things and what that means in application when you start to put them all together.
There's a quick question. Capacity is an obvious criteria. And I didn't see that in this, but maybe it's just so obvious that you don't have to put it as a criteria.
Part of this process, so before this fall, if this proposal is approved, we would collaborate with Schaefer Architects potentially to come in and do a capacity analysis where they walk our facilities and give that information to us as essentially a precursor to RSP's process.
Is that part of the amount?
It would be separate from this 78,500. Dr. Dominguez, it's 2,500.
I think it was close to 20,000. For a Schaefer Architect Group.
I don't think that's right.
2,500?
That's what I thought, but
I'll make sure.
That seems kind of high, particularly when our folks know their buildings. We're not building new buildings, at least not in this activities.
it's part of the enrollment process of, making sure that we have the capacity is set. And we do have a proposal from Schaefer Architects to consider that would come to the board next if this is
I think we- Forward with more information. One other question I had, contract. So I know the contract still needs some work. That's my understanding.
Legal counsel, reviewed it today. There are two potential edits. One is an attorney fee provision and a termination clause for the district. And so if the, board, chooses to move forward, what we would ask is for authorization for Dr. Dominguez to sign off on that agreement once those two edits are, made, and then talk to legal counsel as well, review this option with her, and she's very comfortable and happy with that process.
Is the expectation for this to be approved tonight? Be approved tonight? Or going to the next meeting?
The request is.
Sorry, I wasn't
if-
sure who to
Yeah, you're
ask.
okay. If the board is comfortable enough to approve it so that we can lock in the timeline with RSP. We're unsure if that timeline will still be able to be delivered if we delay it.
Certainly would want the timeline, if we're gonna delay the timeline, that's.
Right, we're already kind of butting up again, trying to get things in line for enrollment for next year. As you know, we usually open that the last week of April, May. So we'd like to do that still, the pre-registration process in our enrollment event in July. So we've kind of tried to work backwards on defining that timeline and then working with RSP because they are in high demand because of the solutions that they offer.
I noticed the draft contract has a spot there for the board attorney. So certainly the draft is already structured for that assurance, if you will, or review of our attorney.
I was curious about the wording on one of those, so. Came to changes, plant changes,
What are you looking for?
4.2. Says Dr. Dominguez, superintendent for the Board of Education, should maybe that say and? We're working together. One or the other.
You have to get that in legal counsel and that's. Well,
So.
That's my comment, John. I think your comments and concerns about the timing and how that could potentially land with 5 new board members is a really good comment. I think it's very legitimate. If I also think that, you know, this is, at least from the way this has been described to me, is that decision on December 8th is to set direction for the committee meetings, but nothing's set in stone. And if the final decisions doesn't come until April, if everything can be provided to all the new board members in December, and I do think it would be important, me personally, even if this time it wasn't what it was, I would like a work session between being handed the information and being asked to make a decision. Because I think there's just a lot, we just, as a board, need to have that opportunity to have a discussion. So if those two things are possible, both, you know, getting all the information to all the board members, including the new ones that aren't sworn in yet, and having a work session ahead of January 8th, I'd feel comfortable with it.
Oh, I'm sorry, John's suggestion there, that was, we were thinking about that as something for the attorney to consider.
The wording.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's.
What did you say, Mark?
I was just saying, that on that 4.2. That's one of the things we're gonna ask her to take a look at is the Dr. Dominguez superintendent or 457 Board of Education. It probably works either way. So. And the other one I think is just with, I would agree, it would be nice, although I might be able to attend as a community person, but I may not be on the board at that point.
In December?
In December, you still.
You will?
December, I
Uh-huh.
will.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. Yep,
Oh,
just
yeah, for the A, I
Yep.
was thinking of the
the
January.
January, sure.
Okay. But I think it's a great idea to have that work session.
Um. Don't want to delay it, but I will move to table it until we can be sure of the contract and maybe make some changes. For the new board members to have plenty of time to digest it and make accurate decisions for the criteria. Would make a motion to table it until we can be sure the contract is complete and maybe possibly make it for the 2024, 2025. Or 20.
This current proposal is for the 24-25 school year, so
25, 26.
So it's kind of indefinite.
Well, it just adjusts the dates. I feel like this is rushed.
Have a motion to table the conversation until we work through all the details. And possibly for the 25-26 school year. Opposed to the 24-25 school year. Is there a second?
Second, just to get some discussion going.
It's been moved and seconded to push the project or to table the project. And kind of work through some details and do it in the 25 and 26 school year. Is there any discussion?
I guess I can start. I was more hesitant on going forward with this motion because I feel like maybe we could go ahead and move forward with getting started on the contingency that we get the wording changed in the contract that you requested and get the retreat set up prior to the meeting, that January meeting. Because I feel like even though the new board members will need to make that decision in January, kind of like what Andy said, we're not making the decision on how we're going to set those boundaries yet. I think the potential is there probably to still push it back a year if we need to, even though we start the process. But I could be wrong.
what you're saying. Okay.
Well, no, I mean, we're signing the contract and perhaps going ahead with the analysis, but it could come to the, not to implement and all of that right away until April. It would be decided in April for sure.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, there's gonna be a lot of community dialogue and hopefully a lot of data to consider. And so our consultant would help the community and the board through that process. And then if there is still apprehension, for example, yeah, I mean, you did spend the money, but then you don't have to change the boundaries.
I guess I would be more uncomfortable if it was January that we're asking the new board members to decide to approve new boundaries. Versus
I
just,
think we're just usually that meeting is to set the criteria, which,
it's just to set the criteria.
yeah, how they would set.
I don't want to delay the process anymore. I think they're going to provide plenty of information. I think agreeing having, that January meeting is not the end all be all day, decisions don't have to be made that day. And I think if I like the idea what Andy said, if the candidates can be there and they can be a part of it and get all that information, I think I would feel better just to move forward now and just go and not, and see where it comes, see where it ends.
And I would echo that too. We really do have to help the community move forward with something that's actually been a need for a couple of years. And the numbers sort of indicate that. Plus the anticipated changes of the community with new employer coming online within that time frame. So I think we've just got to move forward with it. The timing, it's unfortunate that you get new board members, boom, and they're asked to engage. But I think they'll be able to engage as long as we have a good, well-led process. And it certainly worked. Although, you had winners and losers last time. It certainly worked well as a process for the community last time. It is expensive, but it's necessary. So I hate to see us delay it.
And I'm not necessarily for delaying the process, for changing the effective dates and until we're sure that this contract is not necessarily delaying the process. It's that if we do have to have something in here has to get changed or something in here, these meeting dates, we still have time because it wouldn't be effective until the 25-26 school year.
But you still have that ability, even if we pass it today, you always have the ability. It's not set in stone that it has to be.
The next school year.
You still as a board, you can always recommend that, hey, this isn't
Right.
working.
But if we approve this and it has boundary implementation for 24-25.
Yeah, but you're not making the final decision.
Study is happening, the community dialogue is happening. But the final decision, if you will, is still right here with the board.
April 15th.
April 15th would be when we would have to take action on it. And obviously at that point, if you wanted to wait another year, you could make that vote too.
Typically in the district site council process, 2 to 3 board members also serve in that process, so there would be board members that will have an in-depth knowledge of that entire process as well.
Any more discussion? I guess we need to vote. So it was moved that we table the approval of the boundary study. And it was seconded that we table the boundary study. All in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign.
Aye.
I'd like to make a motion. I would move that we proceed with what is proposed here for the study, initiation, engagement of the contract for the contractor, subject to review, as we discussed, legal counsel, and the commitment that we have that work session late this year or early next year, prior to the January 8th commission meeting.
Second.
I was trying to remember how to rephrase your. Yeah, so it's been moved that we move forward with the project with basically the conversation we had about contract and board open retreat prior to the January 8th meeting. Is there a second? All right, it's been moved and seconded that we move forward with the boundary study with the changes in the contract that will be approved by our legal, and that we have a board retreat prior to the January board meeting. Is there any discussion? So, all in favor of approving the boundary study with the provisions, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Aye. Motion carried. All right, new business is child nutrition. Yeah. So, Robert,
He just dropped.
I'm still here. Thank you, everyone. Dr. Dominguez will be in touch tomorrow. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Robert.
You bet.
You.
So, I have on the agenda the handbook for nutrition. Mrs. Johnson was holding on to that and waiting until some of the other handbooks were approved so she could make the necessary changes in her handbook. And so that's been sent to you with the changes. They're pretty minor. Just a few additions, updating staff names and adding some information about clocking in, and things like that. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. I believe that was a first read, am I correct? So that'll be on the consent agenda if you all are good with that for the next meeting. The next thing that I have is the school psychologist intern agreement. So just a little history. Teachers are very hard to hire, which I'm sure that's not going to shock anybody on the board. But school psychologists are equally as difficult, and it's a pretty long process. And so,
Can I correct you on that? I think what you meant to say is they're hard to find in order to hire them.
yeah,
But they're not hard to hire.
yeah, they're hard to find in order to hire. Yeah, that's true. Very true. And so, about 5 years ago, we had an agreement similar to this. Jennifer Cunningham has kind of updated it for us, but we had one school psychologist intern where we did this agreement. So basically, by doing this, the young lady is actually a teacher of ours. And the last intern that we did this with was a teacher for us as well. So she's basically working part-time for us as a teacher. And then she has to do so many hours of internship where she works with a school psychologist, a licensed school psychologist. And so we're paying her for some of her time for some of the work that she's doing as an intern. And by doing that, then she agrees to sign a contract and a commitment with us for 3 years. Questions on that one? Okay, I believe that's a first read as well, so that'll be on the consent agenda for September 11th as well. And I will sit down for just a couple of minutes and be back.
Discussion of the 23-24 district budget.
So different than mine, so I'm like scrambling here. All right, so this evening, as part of the budget process, this is one of these steps in that process, is to come ask the board for approval to publish the budget as presented. So the document here on the screen, it's called our Code 99, which has the summary of all of the funds, and then as well as the notice that we are exceeding the revenue neutral rate. It will be published, it has to be published 10 days prior to the budget hearing. So it would go on our website and then also into the newspaper to publish that our budget hearing will be on September 11th. Typically, we open the budget hearing, exceed the revenue neutral rate, adopt the building needs assessment. There's specific language around those. And then adopt the budget as presented in that September 11th meeting. So really today, it's just asking for the approval of publication of the notice to exceed the revenue neutral rate. And the publication of the 2023-2024 budget to our website and the Garden City Telegram. The language is also included in your packet on the memo for what the motion will look like.
I just have a comment.
Okay.
The meeting we had was it was very helpful. Sit in and understand some things better and did a very good job.
I was gonna say the same thing. The budget committee meeting was very educational. You and Jessica and your team did a great job of explaining that and answering the questions that the board members that were on that committee had.
We from our side really appreciate that process. It helps us work with the board members, make sure that everybody really fully understands the big picture of the budget district. It is very labor intensive, but we want to make sure that the board members are aware and understand the process.
Yeah, I'd say, taking that time to meet with you and Jessica, and there wasn't a single question we asked you didn't have a detailed answer for. And it was really evident to me the amount of work you guys put into that. So appreciate your hard work.
This evening,
I will move to.
I was trying to make the motion, but I
It's on
can't
that memo
find
right
it.
there. Yep. I have it on the memo, the recommendation.
Yes.
It's right there for you.
To approve the publication of the notice exceeding the revenue neutral rate for the 23-24 school year and publication of the 23-24 budget to our website and the Garden City Telegram.
I'll say,
it's been moved and seconded that we approve the publication and the notice that we're gonna exceed the revenue tax neutral rate. Is there any discussion? With that, votes, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Carries. Welcome back, Josh.
It's like musical chairs today. Could organize that a little better so we can all stay up on time. Okay, so I have three more policies for you all today. The first one is the drug-free workplace policy, which we already have a policy in place, and this one just kind of cleans it up a little bit. There was some technical changes and that's really it. So if you look, I've tried to go through all the policies and highlight everything that's on our old policy and our new policy. And so not a significant change, just a few little things on that one. And so I know this is a first read, but we would ask that the board adopt the drug-free workplace alternative 1. So because there's 2 different alternatives that we can choose from. Any questions on that one? Okay. The second one is reduction of teaching staff. We currently have language, and basically it's outlined in our negotiated agreement. Our current language says our current policy says reduction of teaching staff shall be provided for in the negotiated agreement. And so we have one that KSB has recommended that's basically says, if you don't cover that in your negotiated agreement, this is what you should do. I think our recommendation would be to continue with the current policy that we have in place. But it's one that's not been updated since 1992. So it definitely needed to be reviewed and brought to the board. But I would recommend that we continue with the current policy that we have in place and leave it that way. Any questions on that one?
How would you present that on the consent agenda next week or next meeting then? Would you just be absent of the consent agenda, or would you present it?
So I'll put it on there with our memos that we do, and it'll be outlined that way that we continue
To keep current policy.
keep current policy. Yeah. And then when you look at our board policy, then it'll say that it was adopted in June of 1992 and it was reviewed in August of 2023, so that we know that we're current on that. Okay. The next one is policy KN, which is just complaints, and basically this was added. The language was added to clarify the role of the appeal officer if there was a formal complaint that was filed on a staff member, and the individual that filed the formal complaint wanted to appeal. It kind of just clarifies what the role of the appeal officer is. And once again, so our current policy, and you can see it's not a whole lot, it just kind of has a few changes there. It is a little bit longer, but really kind of outlines what that looks like, and some other complaints that you can have, different categories of discrimination that weren't outlined in our current policy. So, and our recommendation for that would be to adopt the new policy as written. Questions on that one? All right. Yep. If y'all have any questions down the road, just holler at me.
It's just so that we can be like.
Yeah.
Dr. Rock is ill today, or she would have been here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I might need Josh to assist with this, but we'll see. I'll take a good stab at it. So Imagine Learning is a online curriculum that we utilize. This quote is for that online curriculum. So it's for credit recovery, virtual courses, and CTE. So it impacts Garden City Achieve, the high school and middle schools as well. So the quote is for a 3-year continuation of current software, current educational platform, and $220,000. It is budgeted out of our textbooks account to be adopted and paid for every 3 years.
This is just a continuation of a program that we've been using within the district, basically.
So that's pretty much the curriculum that our virtual academy uses. Yeah.
Curiosity question. How much did this go up from the last?
3 years ago, we approved 136,000 escalation, but we've also added additional programs and software to support Garden City Achieve students as well as CTE to also meet our requirements for programs as well.
That also provides for math and ELAR component, ELA component for fifth grade all the way up to senior. 5 through 12 component that they can get on with their math component, but then also they can get on with their English component too. So it's more robust than it's ever been.
Yes, sir.
Second. Been moved and seconded that we approve the adaptive learning course for the next 3 years. Is there any discussion?
We have, where does this fund comes out? You said.
Textbooks fund. There's cash balances as of 7/1 were 1.6 million. To make sure, because we are working on a large adoption here in 2 years.
Any more discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we approve the Imagine Learning program and the price quote that was presented. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Carries. Move on to board open discussion. Anybody has comments? Yeah, maybe one. Aye.
You know, I just, it's nice to have a presentation tonight from Buffalo Broadcasting. I think it's great when teachers are able to bring and present to us about the programs they're doing with their students, and particularly have students present as part of that, and they get to speak about their experiences and what they're learning and everything. So I just thank Mr. Vielander and his for coming and doing that tonight. More presentations like that.
I was just gonna say, you know, here we are, starting the second full week of school. So it's kind of curious, I was kind of curious to hear the feedback on, when the newness of the kids back in the classroom wears off. You can continue for a few more weeks, but usually the second full week is the rough week. And I don't know for sure. I'll solicit any feedback, I guess, but just appreciate everything the teachers are doing, and wish the kids the best, and the support staff in the classroom, and transportation seems to be doing fabulous jobs. The excitement continues.
I just want to piggyback on, thank you for the presentation. It was neat to hear another way to, it's good to see kids enthusiastic about being in school and that they're gonna follow in some form and have a plan after high school where we're supporting that. I will say the heat, I think, is taking a toll a little bit with the busing, and I haven't heard a lot about how they've handled that, but I'm sure transportation's doing the best they can to support our drivers and our kids. I do know that the coaches and the trainers have been doing a great job of monitoring our kids and taking water breaks, at least at the middle school level. I haven't talked to as many at the high school level, but just to keep our kids safe during practices. So I appreciate that, because that's an important aspect that sometimes gets overlooked. So thank you. Lots of activities starting.
I did hear the high school practice went from 2 water breaks to 3, so
Yes.
that's good.
Discussion. I would just say thank you guys for all your hard work on all the different stuff that you brought to us tonight as we continue to work through the beast that is policy. So I appreciate you bringing those to us and giving us an opportunity to review those and work through. I also enjoyed the discussion on the boundary study. I'm excited that, we're gonna move forward with that. I have some reservations, obviously, about the timing of it, but I'm excited to move forward because it was a priority of the board. So look forward to see how that unfolds and what that information that they gather and how it's presented to the board and the public for the future. Our next board meeting of the Board of Education will take place on Monday, September 11th, 2023 at 6 p.m. in the board meeting room at the Educational Support Center, 1205 Fleming Street, Garden City, Kansas. And, this time we'll move to executive session.
Mr. President, I move that the Board of Education recess for an executive session at 7:45. 7:45 for the purpose of discussing an employee's job performance. Justification for the executive session is to protect the privacy of the employee's personnel record and is provided by KSA 75-4319B1. The open meeting is to resume in this room at 8:15. Board of Education members and Dr. Domingo shall be included in this session.
Second.
Moved and seconded that we move to executive session. Say aye. Opposed, same sign.
Just tuck in there, I'm always thankful when respected board members do attend to take time out of your days.